Okay, we're ready for our first group. The question under debate is, was Stalin an effective leader for communist Russia? Ashley, you may begin.
Through Joseph Stalin's ruling, a dramatic reform of military and economic powers took place, ultimately shaping Russia to how it is seen to this day and carving a way to a better future for the nation. The Soviet dictator was born in 1878 in a small town of Jori, Georgia, with the name Joseph Vissarionovich Danishvili, which soon shifted to Joseph Stalin, which meant man of steel. Stalin grew up in poverty and struggled a lot as a child. However, when he left school, Stalin became an underground political agitator, taking part in various labor demonstrations and strikes. Soon enough, Stalin rose to power as the leader of the Soviet Union, and the country had a lot in store for them. This chart shows that in 1942, when Stalin was in power, despite certain setbacks, the Soviet Union was still able to field and supply an army that was larger than the opponents, which in this case was Germany. Harrison from the Economic Department at the University of Maverick and Center for Russian and East European Studies at the University of Birmingham states, the Soviet Union was able to provision its troops more intensively, in terms not only of the total munitions and ordnance available, but also in provision per soldier. This is suggested by the fact that the relative Soviet advantage was greater in all lines of equipment, ultimately making their military more powerful. In Stalin's third five-year plan, despite only lasting for 3.5 years, 1938 to 1941, Stalin aimed to produce more consumer goods. In this case, this was radios and bicycles, to grow in economic powers and improve the quality of Russian citizens' lives. The Soviet economy had become more industrialized by the end of the 1930s, mentions globalsecurity.org. This ended up helping transform the Soviet Union from an untrained society into an advanced industrial economy, ultimately assisting to shape the nation and improve it for the future.
Okay, 152. Great, thank you. One moment, Marcus.
Can you over 2 minutes? 210 and he'll cut you off. You can go on. 210 and he'll cut you off.
That's yeah. Well,
There isn't a, just go about 1 minute.
All right, Marcus, you may begin. Audience.
Even though many people face the harsh realities of Stalin's rules, if it wasn't for these rules, the first five-year plan would have never been successful and wouldn't have made Russia into a strong industrial country. According to a conference in 1933 where Stalin met with party members of the USSR, they discussed the first five-year plan and its success. The USSR was able to raise the industrial output of coal, steel, and iron 3 times than what it was before the five-year plans, give Russia new industries such as automobile and modern chemical industries, abolished the unemployment rate, made living conditions increasingly better for Russian citizens, and made Russia, most importantly, into an industrial country with an amazing economy. Stalin's policies were harsh, but for good reason. If a persons were able to do their job correctly, they would receive free clothes, cheap meals, free education, and subsidized health care, with the provision of extensive leisure facilities such as parks, swimming pools, and many others. He also helped the Russian agricultural systems with the idea of collectivized farming, which helped increase farming land by 21 million hectares. Many Russians also wanted communism, as it would be theorized to stop major famine and help working conditions of industrial workers and farmers, in which it did. That's it.
Okay, Kate, we're ready.
As proven by Stalin's modernization of the economy and his changes to the the modernization of the economy and the laws, Stalin truly was a good leader for communist Russia. The change in the economic systems brought forth new resources and new chances for people. The production in steel was increased eightfold to 34.5 million tons, increasing Russia's opportunities for growth and trade. The industrialization and change of the laws was able to give people more chances to do things and give people more opportunities. If without these opportunities, the people in Russia would have faced harder challenges and struggled much more than they did. Stalin truly cared for his people and helped support them in all that he did. And yes, while there may have been a little bit of murder, he was able to fully increase the lives of everyone that lived in Russia. And we can connect Stalin's growth and his drive to be leader to the growth of everyone, and how if we put ourselves in a very driving mindset, how we can accomplish anything we want to do. All of this, once again, shows how Stalin truly was a good leader for communist Russia.
Okay, thank you. You guys can stand down, and the opposition group can come up. I'll still need a minute, but you guys can get ready. If you're using slides, AirPlay now. No, then there's going to be a minute and then rebuttals.
A little bit of one day things come through just one day. Get ready to keep a story.
I froze up. I didn't even read my speech. I wrote a speech. Didn't read it. Nope. Just, I can give you a pencil.
Watch me. I wrote a speech, but I'm not allowed to.
I just like argue that whatever you said is wrong, right?
Yeah, but you have.
I use Marcus to spell.
First speaker.
You're fine.
First is her.
How's it gonna work? Like first speaker, then Martin video.
So mine's less than her than me.
Mr. Ryder.
I'm sorry, I'm not currently
That's what
available.
they'll say.
Just Marty if I can go to the bathroom.
I'm so scared that
I wouldn't miss your opposition speech. Okay. Guys, speaker order. Bryn,
No, I do.
who's put speaker order?
Oh, it's me.
I'm not looking. So, Bryn, Shrez, Stella, is that right?
Stella, Suya.
Okay, Suya.
Same person.
Sorry. Stella, second. Sorry. Sorry, Suya. I do it to my own children too.
So we're your children. Okay.
Okay, we are ready for the contrary view. Stalin was not an effective leader.
So our view is Stalin is not an effective leader.
Okay.
I'm going to start in about 2 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about what makes an effective leader. An effective leader makes sure that their citizens has their basic human rights, like shelter, food, etc. These basic stuff. And Stalin was essentially the exact opposite of this. Through his quest for industrialism and stuff like that, he starved multiple times his citizens. A perfect example of this is this image here. This image is taken during the anti-communist revolution in Hungary in 1956, and they are burning an image of Stalin. You definitely know you're not an effective leader when a part of your territory is revolting against you and burning images of you. And that this can be taken because quite a lot of the time they were forced, these citizens were forced to kill their own livestock and stuff like that just to barely survive because the amount of food coming in was that little. Stalin was an even less effective leader when it came to the war. In World War II, going into it, they had some of the most highly developed aircraft systems and aerospace technology that was being developed at the time. The issue, however, was Stalin had this ideology that scientists work best under fear, and this was an extremely inefficient tactic. So what he would do is he would take massive groups of scientists and murder them to scare the other scientists into working hard enough or working faster. But the problem with this is quite a lot of the time the scientists that he killed to scare the other scientists were the actual good scientists. So all the technology and stuff like that they were developing would just be lost forever because the scientists developing them would just die. And that's just another reason why Stalin was completely ineffective. If we can come back to this revolution here, that this was not the only situation where they were revolting. This was in Hungary, which is a small part of the Soviet Union. There were also I can draw your attention to a trial of two revolutionaries, and what they would do, they would torture them. So they would, their responses would not be, they would have to lie and they would just admit stuff. You're not an effective leader if you're having to torture your citizens and not showing proper justice. An effective leader needs to take care of their citizens, make sure that their government and military is highly developed and stuff like that, so they can protect their own citizens. And most importantly, they need to uphold
We're
justice.
gonna have to stop you there.
220.
Oh, I also need the slides.
Oh, no worries. There you go. Let me just.
So black.
Yeah, just keep the
Yeah.
slide open. Good job.
That was a good idea. Give me a second. I'm just processing how I failed. For one of them. Press button. My speech would have been so mentally structured. Who cares?
Okay, Stella, audience please, Stella, you may begin.
One may claim that Stalin was an effective leader of communist Russia due to his contributions of improving the Russian economy, but Stalin's economic plans has caused the deaths of millions of Russian citizens. An effective leader will build up a nation's economy because it improves the lives of the citizens. Stalin's use of collectivization in Ukraine has been intended to increase the grain production in that area. However, collectivization had caused the Great Holodomor famine in Ukraine, when an estimated of 6 to 8 million people died in merely 12 months, causing a great reduction in the number of workforce. The Ukraine famine was both a great tragedy and an economic loss for the nation. According to PolicyWatcher.org, as you can see in the table, grain production had decreased dramatically from 1930 to 1933. By the end of the famine, the production had dropped from 83.5 million tons to 68.4 million tons, a decrease by 18.08%. If the opposition still insists that Stalin was an effective leader of communist Russia because under his leadership, Soviet economy increased, then what is the opposition's benchmark for measuring how much development is worth 20 million innocent human lives? Another argument used to claim that Stalin was an effective leader of communist Russia was he supported the Allies during World War II. However, Stalin and Hitler actually signed numerous agreements with each other. According to History and Public Policy Program Digital Archive, Secret Protocol's 1933 Non-Aggression Pact included Article 2, which stated to divide up Poland into spheres of influence between Nazi Germany and Russia. While some people may claim that Stalin is just trying to expand the influence and power of communist Russia, Stalin not only cooperated with a murderous dictator, the agreement actually stalled time for Nazi Germany to mobilize, and the agreement was eventually broken by Hitler when he invaded Russia itself in 1941. Therefore, in conclusion, Stalin was not an effective leader of communist Russia. Thank you.
Hold, please, Suyash, hold.
You can use mine. Okay. You're welcome. Just don't take credit.
Okay, Suyash, audience please. I can't ask you guys to come back every time, you just have to be ready to go. Suyash, you can start.
Who is a leader? According to the dictionary, it's someone who leads an organization, country, or group. Literally, Stalin meets the criteria, but was he effective? What makes an effective leader? Is it someone who drives the country to a place where all the citizens want to be? Is it someone who respects each and every citizen? Well, Stalin was none of this. In fact, he revoked the basic human rights of every single one of his citizens, and in this way, he cannot in any way be labeled as effective. When we think of effective and great leaders over the past, we think of men like Gandhi, MLK, and Mandela. Now, I'm not saying these men were perfect. In fact, they were far from it. But they all had one thing in common. They listened to their people. And that's what led them to their stature. If there's one thing Stalin didn't do, it was listen to his people. In fact, he killed 20 million innocent lives. In this case, he can be compared to Pol Pot, another Cambodian communist dictator, who was infamous for his killing fields and is known as one of the most evil and violent of people of all time. But compared to Stalin, he only killed 1.7 million people, 20 million less than Stalin. Stalin once said, a single death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Now, that is the most evil and sadistic quote I've ever heard in my life, and just shows how less he cared for his own people. Stalin is often praised for saving the Soviet Union and sometimes the whole of Europe from Nazis. Sometimes he's praised for his victory in the Great Patriotic War, but in fact, he eviscerated the Red Army with his purges. He entered into non-aggression pact with Hitler and failed to react to the obvious signs of an impending invasion.
Okay, I'll have to ask you to stop there, Siyash. Thank you very much.
Can I say one more sentence?
1 minute from now, your the proposition side has an opportunity to come up for a 1 minute rebuttal. Okay, so you have a minute to prepare, and then you get a minute to rebut. You guys can use this time for preparation also, and then you get a minute to rebut. Okay, we'll try for 2 rounds. Ready, go.
Stalin.
And the permanent was over to
Like the first day they invaded the entire Soviet Air Force was destroyed first. I know, he assassinated the majority.
whoever has ideas, those who
Well, that's such a good category. Stalin was not an effective leader. He defended. Oh man.
whatever they argue against us on rebuttal one, then
Rebuttal? Rebuttal is in prompts. You gotta listen to it. That's the point of the thing.
Yeah, after the first rebuttal round, then we'll draw, so you guys have to Okay, it's time for our rebuttal. Come on up. Ashley, you're on the clock for 1 minute. You may begin.
So yes, Stalin did kill people, and it was tragic, but sometimes an action like that is necessary in order to make a change for the nation. And the question was he effective leader? Was he an effective leader? Not was he a caring leader or was he a kind leader? And he did get lots of things done. So 5-year plans are what modernized the nation and what industrialized it too. And some of you might say that they failed, but really even other countries like America and England recognize this as something that improved the nation and helped it and ultimately helped make it better. And like Suyash mentioned about the Red Army and stuff, and he couldn't do anything to the Red Army because when the Red Army was going on, like he wasn't in power yet, and neither was Lenin at the time. And pretty much all in all, the definition of an effective leader, or effective in general, is successful in producing an intended result. So result means outcome, and even though when it was happening it may have not been preferred or anything, the outcome was that Russia was industrialized and modernized, and Stalin was able to come through with that.
Okay, so we'll have to end it right there. And
Is it the rebuttal from the opposition, or is it
what? No, we're going to opposition next.
from there?
Yep.
Okay.
So, Bryn, Stella, Siyash, who's coming up?
Bryn.
Watch me fail.
So I'm up next, right? I'll make you look good.
yeah,
Okay, Brent. I need you at the front. I'm going to start the timer even if you're not there. Okay, and you're on the clock, buddy.
Okay, so the opposition talked quite a lot about industrialization and stuff like that. But I think what's important to remember here is being an effective leader does not mean just getting to a goal. It means getting to that goal while also protecting and making sure your citizens have the basic human rights and stuff like that. So if in the process of making sure that your industry blooms and your economy blooms, your citizens die of hunger and starvation and these different things, you are not an effective leader. In order to get to a goal, you need to get there as an entire nation, not just the wealthier class. The entire nation needs to get there. That means all the starving people should not be able to starve. So Stalin was really not an effective leader. When it comes to the military, yeah, okay, sure, good military and stuff like that. But did you know that the majority of the Soviet Air Force was destroyed on the first day Germany invaded the Soviet Union? That's not very effective. If you've got all your Air Force in this specific location and you get invaded, it's not an effective defense strategy.
Okay, we'll have to end it there. Okay, each team has 1 more minute of rebuttal opportunity. Marcus, you ready to go?
Talk about starving people and military.
Can we draw?
Oh, yeah, okay. So the next group after Communist Russia will be, pick one. Germany, this.
No!
Germany will be next. Okay, come on up. I'm starting the timer regardless. And audience quiet. Ready, go.
Alright, we talked a lot about dead people, we talked a lot about military. One thing I want you to know about the war, World War II, who cares if Stalin's big old planes, big old metal birds got shot out and destroyed? We still won in the end, and that's what's important. Alright? We want you to know that. And for starving people, the only reason why people starved, lost housing, and things like that was because populations were increasing, and the Russian people weren't as accepting as Stalin's policies. For example, collectivized farming. We all love it. When collectivized farming came around in 1933 to 1934, many Russian farmers were like, collectivized farming? Me no likey, I want to go to old crappy traditional Russian farming. Stalin said, hey, this one better though. Russian people, I like my old version of farming. When forcing them to do collectivized farming, the only thing he was doing was helping Russia's economy and helping increase the population of people and the amount of food and resources that they had to offer to them.
All right. And opposition, you get the last word.
No,
Come on up,
it's not.
Nick.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. Amazing. We're gonna tear apart.
Audience, all leaves.
So, the opposition have said, we talk a lot about dead people. Funny, it's as if 20 million dead citizens actually matters in history. What an interesting fact. Oh well, you know what? Let's compare the Soviet Union to its rival, the United States. Let's see. The United States is also a large nation, having developed economy and a developed industry. Then why doesn't the United States need to kill off 20 million citizens in order to industrialize? And also, not only did Stalin kill off 20 million of his citizens, he had also tortured many of his officers, his military. For example, Korolev, the founder of the Soviet space program, had been tortured by Stalin's officers. He talked about how he was taken away and beaten, and when he asked for a glass of water, they smashed him in the face with a water gun.